What happened here, Adrian?
I heard a shrill voice interrupt my thoughts from the other end of the room. Just as well, though. I had been developing a habit of getting lost in my head recently, thinking about this and that. I tried to tell myself I was just becoming airheaded, but the truth was, my job was beginning to wane on me. I guess I decided to throw my plate to the floor. I laughed in return, practically scoffing at myself. Small shards of glass were collecting on my open palm, deposited carefully by fingertips, while the larger pieces sat in a pile neatly ready to be discarded. I was more irked that the hamburger I was looking forward to eating had been discarded on the linoleum. 5-second rule wasn't quite going to cut it this time around.
Yikes, hope you brought some backup.
Bob continued to chide, almost deriving pleasure out of my pain. For the record, I hadn't brought anything else to eat.
Speaking of backup, I hate to pile on, but we got a new one. Higher-ups want you to assist me with the first coil.
He was quiet for a second as he awaited my reply. I was too busy trying to quell my frustration. It wasn't unusual for a break to be cut short, but damn, it had only been a few minutes.
I'll get you something from the mess hall. My treat.
We didn't always get along, but the gesture was more than enough to get me back on my feet. Discarding the plate into the trash can, I made sure my palm was free of shards. Alright, but I'm getting a drink too, I gestured.
Aren't you the one that just got a raise?
He was quick on the response like he knew what I was going to say. I offered a nudge with my elbow, insisting he lead the way, and with a roll of his eyes, he started making his way out of the room with me following closely behind.
You want the rundown real quick? Well, he's another nutcase.
We've been getting more and more of those lately. What's his deal? I prodded. The more I knew before I got there, the faster things would move along. Our footsteps echoed through the large stone corridor as we traversed.
Not even gonna guess?
Bob tried pulling some level of interest out of me, but I was simply not having it. It was already difficult to hear each other over the wailing that echoed through the facilities. All manner of pleads and cries, begging for freedom from their cell or from mortality. Either way, I hated when people tried talking to me before we got to the cells.
Well, fine.
Bob continued.
Dude was found in his home, wife in his arms.
Guessing the wife hadn't fared too well?
Look at that, earning that promotion.
God, I couldn't stand Bob sometimes. I knew he was jealous of my raise. Like the measly bump in salary was worked up over. Nope, the poor girl is broken every which way. Would have thought a truck had crashed through their living room. I was starting to wonder how far of a walk we needed to take, how much time it would take to make it to the mess hall.
Even worse were the kids. Small bodies like that are easier to pull apart.
Jesus, man, I scoffed. He had such a cold way of talking about victims. Though I guess when you work here as long as he did, that'll happen. That callousness. I could already feel it eating away at my empathy. Bob offered a short grunt in response. Something he only did due to our proximity to the new intake. Otherwise, I'm sure he had a chorus of witty remarks to make about experience and the like. Bob's sausage fingers pressed a heavy metal key into a large iron door. Nothing special about it. Just a tall sheet of dark grey. I heard the mechanism click as he turned his wrist, and the door pushed open freely. Is he supposed to be already hooked up? I asked, staring at the man confined to the chair in the middle of the room. His wrists and ankles were confined by thick brown straps. Around his torso was a length of iron. All I heard from my partner was a sound that conveyed just as much uncertainty as my question did. Neither of us cared. Less work to do. As Bob and I worked on plugging the machine in, he continued his conversation from earlier.
So yeah, found this family all busted up. You know what this character had to say about it?
He spoke candidly, a motion towards the man in the chair. wires branching out from the soft pads adhered to his bald scalp. How could I? Bob finished hooking up his end while I placed the finishing touches and made sure all the patches were connected securely.
Said a ghost killed him. Or a demon. Something along those lines.
Bob pulled a metal stand, housing a small flat-screen television on it over to me.
Ready to see a ghost?
He said, trying to put a spooky spin into his words, like we were at a campfire. Last one claimed aliens abducted those kids, and now this guy? Rich. I claimed, watching the TV flicking to life. You could feel the stench of electricity in the air as the circuit between the man's brain and the TV was established. The TV was plagued with static for a few minutes, before an image started appearing on the screen. I and Bob stood side by side, watching the memories of Walker D. Anderson play out on screen. Or rather, he was reliving his memory and we were privy to it. I'm not going to sit here and pretend I know how all this works worth a damn. I'm just as clueless as the poor prisoner stuck in there. From what I was told, it's like a memory. But the inmates experience it like a dream. They're actually in there, living through the memories of their crimes, watching Walker's memories whirling. I could see him waking up in the middle of the night, his room shrouded in darkness. He looked over to the other side of the bed, but it was empty. We can't hear their memories, unfortunately, but I could tell something startled him. The way he shot out of his bed, practically flying across the room. He was quick, clumsily bumping into door frames and the stairs banister. It looked like the man was about to fall down the stairs. With each step he descended. As he rounded the corner, there she was. A blonde woman, about the same age as the man, reached her arm out to him. I couldn't hear her, but I could tell she was frantic and begging. Her fingers spread so far apart. She was already injured though. With the moonlight layered over her, I could see the dark amber patches and smatterings of blood. Just as Walker stepped towards his wife, reaching his arm out as well, she began to levitate. She was pulled upright. It was odd seeing a body just pop up like that. It looked like she was falling in reverse. At this moment, Walker was still walking forward but flew backwards. Something had shoved his chest and he fell backward. Even as he fell, his eyes stayed focused on his wife. She rose higher and higher, and by the time he hit the floor, she was a foot or two off of it. I strained my eyes watching the memory. I couldn't see anything holding the wife up, but it felt like I should be. Like a primal instinct was trying to warn me that there was a predator near me. Something on the hunt. As Walker stood up in his memory, he started rushing towards his wife, and just before he could make contact, she bent in half at the middle of her spine. It was so quick and simple. It was just like if I pinched a popsicle stick between my fingers. With so little effort I could snap it in half. She shook for a brief moment. The brief outburst of directions fired off the spine before it became useless. Then, she dropped. Her body fell and hit the floor. It was so slick and pooled with blood. I could practically hear the wet smack as she landed. Walker was trembling. I could tell by the way his vision rapidly shifted back and forth, trying to process what he was witnessing. Then he got eerily still. For a moment, I thought his memory had gotten stuck, which is a hassle to deal with. Sometimes a coil will freeze, and we have to pull the prisoner out of their memory, which can corrupt the memory itself, making it inconclusive evidence. Just as I moved to start unplugging everything, the memory continued. My sigh of relief was quickly startled when Walker turned around to see that his children were standing at the bottom of the stairs. Neither Walker nor I knew how much of the wife's brutal end the kids had seen, but they were crying all the same. heads tilted back with their small hands covering wet eyes. Small glints of moonlight reflected on the rivers running down plush cheeks. I knew in the back of my mind what Bob had told me, that the children I was looking at weren't long for this world. But my heart doesn't operate within the cold cynicism that Bob's did. I yearned for those kids to run outside. The front door was so close. I nearly screamed at the screen, catching myself before the words could form. Run. Instead, one of the children got pushed back and pinned against the wall, pulled like a string was connected to his shirt. With the little boy pinned against the wall, the other child, a girl I think, rushed over to Walker and grabbed onto her. Walker was helpless again. That force that was able to throw a grown man and lift his wife now had their child. The little boy flew away from the wall before being pulled back against it, much harder this time. I could see a small back reaching up to the ceiling form from the impact. The body shot out from the wall again, further this time, and like a loop, he was thrown into the wall again. This happened a few times. The boy went limp after the second or third impact, mercifully.
Do you see something?
Bob asked, almost whispering, like he didn't want to ask, but it had been nagging at him. I looked over to him and then back to the screen, squinting my eyes, trying to hone in on that feeling of being watched. The wall behind the kid decayed more and more as he was thrown against the wall. There was something. Maybe? I thought I saw areas where the moonbeams looked to almost bend. Then the little boy, like his mother, was dropped to the floor. Another battered and desecrated body laid limp. I wanted to look away, but I had to watch and get as much detail as I could for when we studied the memory later. Walker looked down at the little girl in his hands. She looked back up at him, wide-eyed, scared. He went to rub the tear from her cheek, but before his thumb pressed her flesh, lines appeared. It was quick and subtle, but long, dark lines crawled quickly up the girl's face, from chin to hairline, 4 lines about 2 inches apart. The lines seemed to grow in girth at first, but this boldness was revealed to be liquid. Blood seeped out from the wounds and, like the tears, started to run down her face. God, the poor kid's face had just been split open, like someone scoring a chicken. I've seen a lot. People can do horrible things to each other, but that poor child, the way her face was frozen in that shocked expression, like she held that moment in stasis before she passed it. It churned my gut something fierce. My hand was covering my mouth before the first heave even arrived.
Jesus, hold it together.
Bob, cold and callous. Not a shred of humanity in those words.
Get the drive. The first coil is over. I'll send him into the next.
We unplugged the man from the TV, but the patches on his head would remain. They would continue to loop him in on that memory, forced to witness it over and over. I grabbed the thumb drive. I could already see his eyes rolling behind closed eyelids as the next coil started up. Rarely do I feel sympathy for the people we process, but something felt off. Not much was said on the walk back to the computer room. I just idly fondled the thumb drive in my hands, not exactly looking forward to watching that tape. Memories, when told, can become finicky, but if the event is recent enough, and the view is offered from within the memory, then a substantial amount of evidence can be gathered through our process. That's the idea anyway. I also think it's a method of making people confess, keep them locked in their worst moments until they can't take it anymore, or until the idea of violence has lost all meaning and rehabilitation can begin. The higher-ups like to push that narrative the most. Rehabilitation. Like shoving a dog's nose in the puddle of urine on your nice white carpet. Only the urine is some of the sickest acts a man can commit. Our job was to monitor these memories, to loop them over and over, or as we call them, coils. Plugging in the thumb drive, I watched the computer downloading the coil we just obtained.
This ain't the first time we've seen something like this.
Bob spoke sternly. I know, it's just... How could he have...
I'll cut you off right there.
Bob's voice was like cold needles to warm skin. When he talked, you listened.
You remember Alice Rutherford?
He looked at me, waiting for some kind of acknowledgement. I nodded my head.
What happened to her?
If I could give Bob credit for anything, it would be his approach to conversation. The way he made you engage. Not just leave the whole time. She claimed aliens had abducted her 2 kids. I restored. Still watching the bar slowly crawl across the screen. Someone's live memories are pretty tough data for any computer to process. Even the big rigs that the government donated to the facility. What did the memory show? I thought back to it. Now that Bob had me reminiscing. It seemed me and he had been appointed to some of the most bizarre cases. My mind wandered to Alice. She was small and frail. Her kids had gone missing, but her neighbors insisted she had them in her house still. When we watched her coil, we could see the kids floating in the air. There are bright lights in the room, and Alice had her arms reaching out, like she was trying to grab them. An alien abduction, I replied, my words soft. I knew what Bob would press next.
And what was it actually?
I recalled watching those memories. How over time the coil got closer and closer to the truth. The image of her children floating there, mere inches from the ceiling. Alice. We never found out what exactly happened. By all accounts, she was respected by those around her. Everyone spoke highly of her, for raising 2 kids as a single mother. She was picture perfect. So it was a surprise to everyone when it was revealed. Alice had fashioned a set of nooses to her ceiling. Cops believe it was initially meant to be an anchor for a swing of sorts, but with a system of pulleys, even Alice's frail arms could pull the light children up. They were helpless. I remember reviewing that case over and over, hoping that image would shift back to the scene offered by the abduction narrative. But when something like that breaks, you can't put it together. She had done it. My lips quivered out. How many times have we had this talk? How many more times will we have it? Without another word, we began watching the coil over and over, absorbing every detail. So if something were meant to change the next time, we hooked our prisoner up, we would notice. Soon though, we had spectators. It happens from time to time. People will rally around the screens to watch a particularly odd or gruesome case. I used to protest this behavior, but I'm not high enough on command to enforce it. And I suppose it's not hurting anyone.
Oh, that's messed up.
Marty spoke, one of the newer guys, typically assigned to cases involving vehicles. So he wasn't used to seeing things like this. From behind me and Bob, there was a curious chorus of ohs and ahs. It was enough to make my teeth grit against each other, like they were watching a movie or something. Bob, the worst of it, muttering off small little jokes. Even if the guy had done it, there were still people hurt, lives lost. That's not I had to stop my train of thought. I could feel my fingernails digging into the desk. As I was pulling myself from the despair, there was a sharp
boo
in my ear. Marty had taken it upon himself to try and scare me when he saw how I was zoning out. Nearly grabbed that squirrely twerp by the collar as he started laughing at me. Didn't you piss your pants when you saw that crash off of 49? I retorted, channeling my best impression of Bob, callous.
Hey, screw you. This stuff is repulsive anyways.
Marty replied. He turned around and started walking away before turning to look at the screen once more. I could almost feel him shiver. He was afraid of it. I didn't talk to him much, but I overheard him telling ghost stories all the time. He's a believer. As the room thinned out, it soon came to be the end of our shift. We reconvene in the morning and take another look at what changes Walker's mind had made to the memory, and hopefully closer to the truth. Shutting everything down, I heard Bob leaving the room first. Never one to stick around long. With my jaw stretching, I realized I hadn't gotten to take my break. My bones were feeling it. As I stood, I looked at the screen. The image was paused on the frame where his wife was reaching out to him. All alone in the room, I stood, staring at her. The longer I looked, the more it felt like she was reaching out to me. Like her hand might come through the TV. Then, as the image buzzed, I heard the door close. My attention snapped over to the door leading out of the computer room. It was the second time I heard the door close. The last being when Bob left the room. I was the last one there. I considered for a moment that someone had forgotten something, but there was a nagging sensation. Hurried steps took me over to the door and I swung it open, leaning out and peering into the hall, swiveling my head. It was empty. The overhead lights dimly lit the long stone corridor vacant of life. On either side, I saw a series of metal doors housing inmates. All the lights above the doors were red, meaning there was no staff in any nearby rooms. Looking back at the TV, I felt an eerie blanket fall over me. Staring at the screen, it felt as though I was missing something. It was a feeling that was uncomfortable enough to bring me back to the TV. Turning it off and quickly exiting the room with a thumb drive, I walked down the hall, alone this time. Passing by the several rooms where prisoners resided, or stuck within their memories. You'd think they'd be wailing or begging to be let go, but it was similar to extended sleep. They would be unable to move or to articulate until we unplugged them. And once they are awake, the passage of time will seem like nothing to them. They'll remember how long they were stuck in the dreams, but it will feel like mere minutes they've passed when they wake up. As I stepped down the hallway, hearing my feet echo off the hard surface under me, I swore for a moment. There was another step in the echo. I halted and turned around to face the intrusion, but the hallway was predictably empty. That's what my eyes were telling me anyway. But just like with Walker's memory, I felt like there was a set of eyes on me. And the more I stared into the seemingly endless tunnel, the more that feeling took shape. As the nerves in my chest reached a fever pitch, I shut my eyes tight and took a deep breath. It had been a long day, and a job like this can get to you, so I convinced myself that all I needed was some good sleep. Before long, I found myself in my living quarter hunkering down for the night. As the program was experimental, the high-ups preferred when we leave the building as little as possible. Dim lighting and the hum of soft electrics became my sun and chirping birds. It was a job suited to people without much going on in their lives. No one will miss you. To miss me. I only knew it was morning thanks to the alarm going off, a loud buzz that would rouse all the employees. I found myself walking down the hall again, this time much more crowded as other guards were shuffling into the metal doors, turning the red lights above them green, like ants running through their colony. I wasn't surprised to see Bob already hooking Walker up to the TV. The guy was probably up and at him before the alarm even went off. He looked over at me and gave a quick nod. Must have been a rough night for him. He would occasionally drop hints that he had issues sleeping. About as personal as Bob would ever get with me.
We're all set to go.
Bob spoke, and sure enough, I could hear the gravel of a sleepless night rattle in his throat. "Alright, I'm ready," I replied, pulling the small notepad from my pocket. Flipping to the page labelled Walker, I quickly read all the notes about his call I had written down. I and Bob watched in silence as the newest coil played out in front of us. We watched the events unfolding just as they had before. This time, though, we were more interested in the background details. The colour of lamps or the way the moonlight landed on surfaces. Where the side tables were or the clothing that everyone had on.
That's impossible.
Bob spoke as the coil came to an end.
Did you see anything?
He continued, turning to me. Was he concerned? No, My words caught in my throat. Play it again. Normally we could just download it and watch the coil in the observation room. But I needed to see it again right there and then. And Bob did too. He moved to the TV and restarted the coil. We watched it again. The silence in the room was so surreal. Like we were both holding our breath in an attempt to soak in all the minute details. It was the same result though. No matter how hard I looked.
Nothing changed.
Bob stuttered out.
That doesn't happen.
His voice was shaken. I couldn't blame him. He was right. Even with dramatic memories, it is nearly impossible to recall all the details. This meant upon viewing the coil again, something should have changed, regardless of how insignificant it was. Nothing was out of place.
Play it again.
Bob, I don't think...
Play it again.
He asserted himself, stuffing my words back into my chest. Something was pulling at him, something I wasn't quite able to understand. Like he knew the punchline before the joke had even started. I wasn't going to press him further, so I restarted the coil for the third time. We watched it all the way to the point where the scars appeared on the little girl's face. In detail, I was once again subject to the way her face just opened up. There was no resistance, and the skin just parted. Then, the coil seemed to freeze. The image of the wounds opening up on her face remained static on the screen. We were static as well, both unflinching, taking in the opportunity to stare at the little girl's face. Has anything changed? Even a speck of dust or a strand of hair out of place? I leaned in. Were all the wounds the same severity as before? Same length? Same amount of blood spilling out? Why? Why was I getting so close? I didn't feel like the master of my senses anymore, like a string was pulling me closer to the image.
What the hell is that?
Bob whispered beside me. Once again, though, he wasn't talking to me. I tried to focus more. What was he seeing? Closer. 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 I could feel the static of the TV reaching out to the hair on my nose. I stared into the little girl's auburn eyes, just as they flicked to me. Her eyes from one frame to the next shifted to glare right back at me. The urges that had been building up to retreat all let loose at once, and I threw myself back away from the TV. My back hit the concrete wall hard enough to cause my whole body to shiver.
Did you see it?
Said Bob. He was talking to me, looking right at me. His eyes looked just like hers. Incomprehensible horror. Turn it off, I replied, refusing to acknowledge his words. I could see it. It is the best word I could muster. Not a monster or some broken human. An idea. A whisper of something else. Seeing it was like when someone is talking to you but you aren't listening. The way their words mesh and compound into nothing. Background noise. Bob moved to the TV and pressed down on it. The TV stayed on. He had restarted the coil again.
It isn't possible.
Frustrated, I stood and released myself from the room. My feet hit the pavement hard, smacking the echo through the hall. I could feel the sting through the soles of my shoes. I thought about Alice again, watching her kids wriggle around as she choked the life out of them. This didn't feel like that. Walker was. What he saw was not some...
Adrian?
At first, I thought it was Bob calling me back, but the voice was meek and shaky. I turned around to see Marty, the glow of the TV cast out on the open door wrapped around his face. He wasn't looking at me though. His gaze was fixated on the door, watching Walker's memory.
It's in my head.
The way he talked was slow, like his words were being filtered through honey. His face pivoted towards me, moving as slow as his words sounded. It was then, with the assistance of the TV's glow, that I could see, on the right side of his face, the gashes. He whispered soft words that were loud enough to hear, but quiet enough it took my brain a moment to comprehend what he was saying. By the time I deciphered those words, the lights above us went out. I was only able to see Marty because the TV in Walker's room was still on, and with the lights out, it seemed more present than ever. The grey light punctured the open wounds on the side of Marty's face, globs of blood oozing out. They were as fresh as could be. Not just fresh, they were being created right before my eyes. The light from the TV seemed to almost lead the opening of wounds. My feet were moving back, the rubber from my shoes scruffing against the floor as Marty watched my retreat. Just as the thought to turn around entered my sight, Marty's body was thrown to the side. He looked like the other kid did in the memory, the way his body slammed against the concrete wall. I couldn't hear what it sounded like when I watched Walker's memory, but with Marty, in that big empty hall, I heard the noise echo over and over. A wet towel hitting the bathroom floor. That smack resounded. It was a noise that almost made Marty seem more like an object. Humans shouldn't ever sound that way. His body was mangled as it pressed against the wall. That one hard hit was enough to crumble his arm and twist his leg. When his body dropped, he looked like a doll, stuffed with cotton and straw. There was no rigid structure underneath his skin anymore, just broken bones free to twist whichever way they like. It was difficult, trying to catch a good breath as I tried to observe the idea that was standing over Marty's corpse. It was an etching of a figure, like someone had carved their initials under a bark tree and replaced the bark. It was there. I knew it was there. It crawled through my thoughts, but my eyes told me I was alone in that hallway. My mind, the part of my consciousness, saw myself as prey. It screamed, howled for me to run. I turned, facing the long and dark empty hallway, illuminated only by the red lights present above each door. They ran on a different battery to make sure that the doors always remained locked. My feet started moving quickly. The change in pace was almost as jarring as I zipped by the first pair of red lights. The lights hardly helped. If I needed to navigate any obstacles, I'd have been out of luck. And out of luck I was. Pressing past the third set of lights, I felt my toes cram into something laying on the floor. I was at full sprint at this point. I was helpless against the forward momentum that was throwing me to the ground. My elbows came up, but they afforded me very little comfort as I slammed into the concrete floor. Again, my body shivered and racked with pain, elbows feeling like they might shatter from the lightest touch. Momentarily rolling into a ball, I could feel the adrenaline surging through me. It hurt like hell, but I had the energy to rise, keep running. I looked back, my eyes becoming used to the darkness. I could see what I had tripped over. It was Samantha. She hadn't said anything at the time, but she was there among the audience that watched Walker's tape in the observation room. She was a superstitious one. I'd always wondered why she took this job. Though it didn't matter anymore. Her superstitions had caught up with her. Upon first glance, I actually thought, wow, was she always this tall? But with the small bit of red lighting that fell on her, I could see clear enough. Her body had been bifurcated. Legs and torso became separate entities or lying apart from one another. The thing had ripped the girl right in half. After seeing the footage, it must have gone into her head something awful. That must be how it works. It gets in your head, just enough. Just reaching far enough into our reality that we should be affected by it. And affected by it we all were. As I scrambled back to my feet, ready to continue my retreat, I looked down the hall and could see shapes, crumbled over areas of richer darkness, silhouettes of all shapes and sizes lining the hall. Co-workers, all motionless and desecrated. I was thankful the lights overhead had gone out, though I admit my mind flutters with the thought of what those bodies look like. How they might be mangled. What creative liberties did this thing take when it crept into their minds? How did it spread so much? Was even just the word of mouth enough to implant the idea of it? As I was thankful for the lights being off, I remembered that the break room also ran on a separate battery, the same as the door locks. So in the event of a power outage, staff would have somewhere to go. That's where I headed. The whole time I could feel that thing right behind me. No, maybe that's not right. It was there with me, lingering in my thoughts. Every time my mind would wander to its existence, every time I tried to understand it, I could feel it closing in on me. It was chasing me not physically, but within my head. I reached the break room and was relieved to be bathed in its lights. Even more relieved to see that I was the only one there. I was worried it would be filled with the same carnage that was present in the hall, though the fact I was the only one there meant that the same carnage was likely to spread much further than I thought. I got as far as I could away from the door, whatever good I thought that would do me. There it was, on the floor, a white shard of glass I had missed. I reached down and picked the shard up, held it. That plate was the last clear thought I had since meeting Walker. Sitting there undisturbed all this time, I stared at it as it rested in my hand. My habit of zoning out creeping its way even at a time like that. It was there, with a clear head that drifted far away from the massacre I left behind, that the intrusive thought was free to wiggle in. My fingers wrapped around the shard tightly. I could feel the edges of it digging into my skin. I didn't even hesitate. I turned to the counter and brought my forehead down as hard as I could against it. There was a hard thwack, and I couldn't tell if it was the counter or my skull that sounded like it was cracking. Either way, the first hit didn't suffice. The second one, though, cast me into darkness. And that's after you guys must have come across me.
You sure there's nothing else you'd like to admit?
I know what you're getting at, okay? Do you really think I could have done all that?
You're the only one found in that section alive, on the floor with a weapon in your hands, Adrian.
I'm telling you, I didn't...
This job can get to you. All the stuff you see. It's reasonable that someone might... snap.
I didn't. I can't rip people in half.
With enough time.
I'm telling you, I don't have a motive or anything.
Bob was found brutalized. The room was nearly painted with the guy. Easy to see he suffered the most. As if he was the main target. After that, you just couldn't stop.
I didn't exactly love the guy, but I wouldn't kill him. I wouldn't kill anyone.
We'll see.
What do you mean, we'll see?
Can I get some help here?
Hey, answer me, what do you mean?
Strap her down.
No, please, God, no, don't do this. I can't.
That's what this whole program is for, Adrian.
Please stop, please. Please stop.
You can lie to us all you want, but your memories, they're still so fresh. We'll get what we need. You know how it works. Pluck the truth right out of you.
Oh, no, oh God. Don't watch it. Okay, I did it. I killed them all one after another. I couldn't take the job anymore. Please, just... Please, don't let it in. Whatever you see in my memories, don't let it in. I hope you enjoyed this story. This story was written by AuthorJoJo, otherwise known as the April Tapes. He is currently offering commissions, so if you want an amazing story of your own, definitely pick it up. I was also joined today by Derek Weber and by Big Daddy Stone. Please make sure you check out their channels. And last but not least, Mad Chatter for his special effects and audio help. This video is made with the support of my incredible channel members, Patreons, tippers, subscribers, and all my viewers. Thank you so much for supporting me. Stay safe, my little spooklings. And remember, I'll be watching you.